We're rolling. Welcome to the REI Rookies Podcast, the Real Estate Investing Rookies Podcast, episode number 110, where we invite you to follow us on our journey towards financial freedom using the power of real estate. I'm Josh Koth, and Jack Haas is trapped in a dungeon somewhere, writing offers. Here at REI Rookies, we believe in a couple key principles. Number one, the best way to retain information is by teaching it to others. And number two, a rising tide lifts all boats. We're not competitors. We're a community. So let's get into some real estate investing. All right, everybody, this week on the show, Jack interviews Mark Willis, who's a certified financial planner, and they talk a lot about different investment strategies, whether debt is a good investment, diversifying your tax strategy, and real estate strategies. So check out Jack's interview with Mark Willis.
Well, we have Mark Willis on the call here today. And Mark, I'm just going to start things off by letting you really introduce yourself, because I've definitely found that coming out of your own mouth, it's always going to flow a lot better, and you can provide a lot more detail. So let's start there.
Sure. Yeah. And thank you very much again, Jack, for having me on today. And, I guess I'll just share briefly about about my wife and I's story and where we've come from, and then dive into some value, hopefully, for your listeners here today. I went through college and graduate school. My wife as well. We went through 3 private school degrees between us and graduated in 2008 with no real financial plan and no way to pay off the 6 figures of student loan debt that we had accrued while we were in school. And then we moved to a, very inexpensive city, Chicago, Illinois. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's, very inexpensive to live. No, I'm just kidding. It was very expensive to live here. And we started working as hard as we could with various streams of income during what turned out to be the Great Recession, and really having a hard time getting meaningful employment. Our degrees were not exactly employable in the midst of that terrible downturn that we all experienced. And so I did start to work for a CPA firm, and they really got me turned on to personal financial planning. And, I'd begun listening to the likes of financial infotainers on the radio and such before that, but this really got me interested in, how can I best serve people and help them meet their financial objectives? But it was in the middle of the Great Recession. And, the real craziness here is that there was it was listening to the CPA that just floored me when she would call up her clients and say, "I'm sorry, Mr. Client or Mrs. Client, but I just lost you half your life savings. You're going to have to work another 10 years. And these are folks in their 60s and late 50s. And it just really reminded me how much of a house of cards the Wall Street game is. It's there is no permanency. There's no real wealth that's built in Wall Street. You're only really getting wealthy when you sell the stock and walk away with your cash.
Yes, it's interesting. It seems like, I hate to say this out loud, but there's always been a kind of a division line or some sort of it seems like we're always in some sort of silent battle between financial planners. Between real estate investing, that it's been one of those things that just constantly or seems to pop up. So what would you say is, I hate to put it in this way, because I do have some friends that are financial planners, but what would you say then? Would you say that's the primary reason that what's wrong with financial planning today is that this house of cards you just talked about?
Well, look, I'm a classically trained certified financial planner. And I went through all the hoops, to earn that designation. And I believe that, equities and mutual funds have a place in one's portfolio. We just typically have it in all the wrong places. Sure. I mean, if you open up the portfolio of any general, man on the street, you're going to find that they've got, $400 in cash in their savings account. That's according to a Federal Reserve study. No one. On average, the average saved amount for the average American is $400. And anything above that, according to the study, one would have to go into debt or sell something to pay for an emergency of more than $400.
Sure.
Okay, so that's supposed to be the base. That's supposed to be the platform, the foundation of our life is that cash ready to go money.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is tied up in our homes, our personal residences, which produce no income for us, and the rest is in a Wall Street 401k, which we can't touch till we're 59 and a half. That is an upside down financial world, and it creates anxiety. It creates instability. I mean, think of an upside down pyramid, if you like. I mean, would you want to live and sleep and work for years and years under an upside down pyramid that could topple over at any moment?
Mm-hmm.
That's how most people's financial lives are built. And Jack, I believe that has an impact on how one lives their life. I mean, I think that impacts marriages. I think it impacts, depression rates. I think it impacts, there's even a recent study that was published by the American Journal, the Journal for American Medical Association, or JAMA,
Mm-hmm.
that said that a wealth shock is a diagnosable condition where if you have an experience of major financial loss, on average, you lose 2.5 years of your life.
Oh, wow.
According to the study. So there's verifiable medical connections between where you put your money, like Wall Street, and your lifespan. That should cause all of us to take a moment and think about, where do we put our money, and is it doing what we want it to do for us? And traditional financial planning tells us that we should just not look at it, not think about it, and just hope and pray that the Wall Street white knight will come in and rescue us when it's time to retire. Unfortunately, I've seen that not come to pass.
Yeah. Well, what do you think then about the claims? This is something that has popped up a few times, even in our real estate investing meetup, where in fact, we'll run numbers on the whiteboard with the example that the stock market giving an average of 10% return.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd be curious if you were unable to swim. I don't know if you can swim or not, but let's say I told you that river over there, we needed to cross it. You had to get across that river, and that river was an average of 5 feet deep.
Sure.
And you couldn't swim, and it was an average as we cross it of 5 feet. Would you feel comfortable crossing that river?
Probably not. Just because.
Why not? Why not? It's an average of 5 feet. I assume you're maybe taller than 5 feet. So couldn't you get across it?
Not by much.
The problem is averages mean nothing, right? It's the volatility of the index. So the index could be 8% or 10% or 20%. But the real return is what matters. The compound annual growth rate is something that really is not talked about, and it isn't even advertised by mutual funds. They are allowed to advertise the average return, but again, you can have average of any number, and it still doesn't mean you earned any money. I'll give you a quick example. Let's say that you put $10,000 into a mutual fund, $10,000, and let's say this year you earned 100% return on your money. Okay, You're feeling great. You just doubled your money, went from 10,000 to 20,000, right? Okay, next year we're at 20,000 as we start the year. Now we lose half your money. Okay, whoops. What have we gone? So we've gone from 20,000 back down to your original $10,000, negative 50%, right?
Yep.
How much more money do you have at the end of that 2-year period? Well, none.
Right.
What was the average return? Well, 100 plus a negative 50 divided by 2 years is an average return of 25%. Jack, I made you 25%. Aren't you happy?
So, I haven't, just to pick up where you left off there, I haven't heard anybody describe it that way before. So that's a great analogy on what you're talking about.
Well, let's look at the real return of actual investors. So average returns mean nothing. That's why we named our podcast Not Your Average Financial Podcast, by the way.
Right.
But we, just for a play on that. But what's the real return of actual investors? Let's take a look. Over the last 30 years, the well-respected independent research firm of Dalbar does research on real returns of actual investors in Wall Street. And they look at everything from all stocks to a blend of stocks and bonds. Let's take a look at the equity mutual fund investor. These are the folks that are all in 100% on stocks and mutual funds, okay? What was their real return over the last 30 years?
Gee, now after that analogy, I couldn't even guess.
It's about 3.6%.
Wow.
And that's before fees. And that's
Wow.
before taxes.
Okay.
Can you believe that? Was that worth the roller coaster? I mean, we've had a pretty wild roller coaster over the last 30 years, right?
Yeah.
So
Well,
I'm
I
not a
mean,
big
just look at the stock market over the past year. And
fan. Mhm.
it's been pretty crazy.
So I'm not telling folks to not have money in stocks and bonds. I think they have a place. The way I look at it is, let's make a distinction between saving and investing.
Sure.
Save the money you cannot afford to lose. Go ahead and invest the money that you can afford to lose.
Sure. So let's go get into that then a little bit. How do you propose, or how do you help people regarding this? I guess it's going to be a different way of investing.
Yeah, I mean, where is it written that we need to use Wall Street just to grow our wealth or retire comfortably, right? I mean, it's not on, I didn't see it in the 10 Commandments or anything. So, where's it written that we have to put all of our eggs in that basket just to accept roller coaster rides and, sleepless nights that Wall Street gives us? I mean, why do we have to accept that there's tremendous assets under management fees that just compound against us? I heard a recent study by the Department of Labor that came out that said that if you have a 1% fee on your money each year, which doesn't sound like a lot, Jack, right? That's not a lot of money. Over 30 years, that's a 30-year life savings, according to 37% specifically, according to the Department of Labor. That's a lot of my life savings gone to some investment advisor, right?
Right.
And here I am. I'm a certified financial planner saying this. I don't know why other people aren't ringing the bell on this, but it needs to be talked about. This is a lot of people's real money. That's the difference of being able to retire or having to work into your 70s at Walmart. So, what we do is we sit down with folks on an advisory role, and we just conduct a real listening session. I really believe that if we can just hear what people want their money to do for them, they'll tell us. And most people that I sit down with say things like, "Hey, Mark, I just want my money to be there when I go to look for it. I want a good, consistent return that I don't have to worry about. I want to be able to get access to it without a bunch of taxes or penalties. I want to be able to use my money and let it, still continue to grow for me. I want to have liquid access to it for opportunities like real estate purchases. A lot of our clients are in real estate investments of all sorts, and they want some sort of accountability system, some way for a partner or a guide to come alongside them to help make sure they're hitting their milestones without taking a bunch of unnecessary risks." So that's what we do. We just sit down with folks and do a blueprint, help build them that pathway to get them from where they are to where they want to go. And then we become a sort of financial guide, if you will. They're the hero of their own journey. We're just coming along for the ride.
Sure. So when you're talking to them and helping them define this path, like what are some of those core questions that you typically ask your clients?
Yeah, one of the big questions is, again, what do you want your money to do for you? Because if you think about it, Jack, there's only a number of places you can put money. I tried to keep track of it as I was going through my studies and licenses and my CFP designation. It's about 450 products, kind of asset classes, if you will, stocks, hedge funds, dynastic trusts, real estate. I mean, you could get, the list goes on and on. And so where you put your money makes it act different. A savings account is different than swampland in Florida, right? It just acts different. There's different tax advantages and there's different risk portfolios. So again, the most important thing your listeners can hopefully take from this meeting is just this episode is, what do you want your money to do for you? How do you want it to act? If you could wave a magic wand and have it do anything, what are some things you'd like it to do? And a lot of people, again, have that sort of checklist. Well, I want it to, grow. I want it to be safe. I want it to have tax advantages. I want to be able to give it to my kids. I don't want it to be exposed to lawsuits. I don't want it to be taxable in my retirement. I want to be able to spend it without being worried about outliving my money. I mean, all those things are tell me if I'm wrong there, but some of those sort of fit what you hear some of your audience say that they're hoping to do with their cash.
Well, absolutely. And I would guess that those are the attributes you aim for then when you're working with a client's portfolio.
Correct. And by starting with listening, by starting with asking people questions like that, and again, getting a big picture of their overall portfolio as a financial planner, you have to know the big picture before you make any recommendations, just like a doctor, just like a doctor would. Once we hear from them what they want, then it really makes my job very easy. We just start crossing things off the list. Okay, all right, you want certain characteristics and attributes for your money to do certain things. Well, we can chop off about 99% of financial vehicles that are not a good fit. Boy, I can't tell you how many people I've met who have some variable annuity or some, old multifamily apartment building or some, just some underperforming mutual fund that just has nothing to do with their overall goals, and they don't remember why they got it, or they feel bad about it. And it's just, let's start with where we are and take those steps to help our money work for us rather than the other way around.
Sure. So do you have any characteristics or strategies you consider like important? I mean, compared to like a traditional financial planner then?
We are kind of the weirdos, it feels like, in the financial world, the financial universe. We really believe that if you build your financial pyramid the right side up, it should start with safe, predictable, guaranteed liquid cash, and not just stuff in a savings account. I'm not talking about that, although there is a place for normal, regular checking and savings, right? And other cash equivalents. But one of the places that we feel like is just way underrepresented in most people's financial lives is using of all things, a modernized form of dividend-paying whole life insurance. And we're using it as a way to just accelerate. We build the policy and engineer the policy in a way that helps it just flood it with cash. So it's a big cash machine that happens to have a death benefit attached.
Sure.
Right. So it's really squeezing the expenses and kind of the slow growth that we've all come to hate with whole life insurance. We're squeezing that down to as small as possible and flooding it with capital, like massive amounts of cash, so that it becomes, it does a few things. If we do it right, it does a few things really well. You mind if I share maybe just 3 or 4?
Go ahead.
Okay, so if it's designed right, again, this is different than what our parents might have had, Jack, with whole life decades ago, right?
Right.
If it's done right, it does a few things really, really well. One, it grows on a guaranteed basis every single year, no matter what's going on in our real estate portfolios or in the stock market or anything. So it's always going to have more cash this year than we had last year.
Okay.
Guaranteed. Second, it is tax-free access to the money. So it's kind of like a Roth IRA. In fact, some people refer to this strategy as the rich person's Roth, in that there's no phase out, there's no income phase outs, there's no contribution limits. You can put whatever you want into this thing as long as you can be approved for the policy, of course. And then you can get that money out 100% tax-free under current law, of course, like a Roth IRA, but without all the restrictions. You can pull the money out when you're 42 and a half or 59 and a half or 89 and a half. It's your cash. So it's not a government-sponsored retirement plan, so you can do whatever you want, and there's no taxes due when you access the money. So that's number 2. The third thing is that it is life insurance. So we're creating a big liquid pool of money that we can use to pay off any estate taxes or leave an inheritance to our beneficiaries, our kiddos, our next generation, our charity, whatever. A lot of the folks that are in real estate that I work with still have the fear that we're going to have an estate tax problem when they pass away. They see that we're up at like 22 million for a couple right now, right? Super high estate tax threshold right now, but they weren't born yesterday, Jack. They know that isn't going to last forever. And if they die in the wrong year and the estate tax is at $1 million again, like it was just 15 years ago, then they're going to owe a lot of taxes to the IRS, to the government. 40% of your life savings could be given to the IRS if you pass away in the wrong year. So they use life insurance to wipe that out, pay that estate tax for them, and that allows them, by the way, to keep all their real estate. They don't have to sell that real estate when they die. They can keep that real estate in the family, pass it along to the kids, use the life insurance as a way to liquidate that tax problem. So that's one of the secret ways that you can use life insurance to keep your real estate and pass it on to future generations.
Sure. So can you go a little deeper on that then too? Like, so you have this money in this account. What can you access and use that money for anything?
You can, yeah. So we mentioned how it grows in a guaranteed way. And I've mentioned 3 out of the 4 things that you can sort of see this policy do for you. Let's talk about the 4th one. And that is you can access the money and become your own banker.
Okay.
So you can use this cash. It's a big pool of money. However, you've packed that money in and it's grown with dividends over the years. And now it's a big pile of cash. And you can access that money and use it for any reason you want. There's no limit, and there's no prohibited transactions on what you could use the cash for. You could go on a trip to Disney World, or you could use it to buy some real estate, or you could send your kids to college. And Jack, one of the most crazy things that I've learned about this in this strategy is that when you borrow from the policy, when you access this policy loan feature that's given on whole life insurance, if it's with the right company and if it was designed correctly, the policy will continue to grow as if you had not taken the money out. So let me say that again. If you had $100,000 in cash value and you borrowed $30,000 out to buy a car, your policy would pay you the same dividend, the full $100,000, even on the capital you borrowed. So it's like your money just doing 2 things at once.
So, with you kind of described this as the rich person's IRA, but is there any kind of cap associated with how much money you can put in, like on an annual basis, like an IRA?
No.
You can just, like you said, flood it.
Yeah, as long as you've designed it from the start. Think of it kind of like a gas tank. So, most of these policies are designed with a certain size amount that you can pack in, but you get to decide what that is. When you go to the car lot, you can pick, do I want a small car that has 8-gallon tank, or do I want a big SUV that's got a 20-gallon tank? You get to decide that when you set up your policy. You say, all right, I want to put in $10,000 a year, or I want to put in $500,000 a year, and that's your limit on what you can pack into the policy.
Yeah, that's interesting. So if somebody, like, based on what you've seen in the past, then they have a traditional IRA, a retirement account, adding this specific strategy to the mix, what type of changes have you seen regarding their financial health? I know that's being very generic or what have you, but I'm sure you've seen some anecdotes at this point.
Oh man, no, it gets very specific. I mean, I'll tell you a few fun stories that have happened recently. Obviously, we'll talk about who this is not a good fit for, and when it doesn't make sense, we don't recommend it, obviously, just to everybody. Sure. But when it does make sense, it changes people's lives. It's like an axe is a great tool, but unless you know how to use it well, it's going to not be a good fit, right? So when it works well, here's what can happen. A couple of quick stories. I had a gentleman who uses his policy a couple times a year to buy a fixer-upper house and fix and flip the property. And then when he gets profits, he just puts the money right back into his policy as profit to use for the next property and the next property. So it's sort of his sell account while he waits for new opportunities. That just provides for him a place to pull money and pay cash for his real estate, and helps him get the best deals when other people are needing to hopefully and beg and borrow from a bank, right? So it makes him more competitive. It also gives him the advantage of growing his money inside the real estate and inside the policy at the same time. Super cool. By the way, when you borrow from these policies, there is no required repayment plan. So he's not having to come up with $500 a month or whatever to pay on the policy loan. He just waits. There's no required repayment plan. And then when the property sells, he just wipes out the policy loan. If you die and you never pay the loan off, they just deduct it from your $1 million death benefit. Do
you have to, is there any like specific return that has to go back to the account or anything like that? Or
yeah, great question. Yeah, the insurance companies aren't fools. They know that they need to charge a loan interest on policy loans. So they charge a loan interest that's typically way below market rates. Usually it's on a simple interest schedule, by the way, Jack. But just to give you an idea, they'd be way below market rates. Over a 4-year period, APR might be around 2% or so. Meanwhile, remember, your policy is earning growth and dividends even on the cash that you borrowed to buy the house or the real estate or whatnot. So there's usually some arbitrage there.
So, if you just had the money sitting in that account and you weren't doing anything with it, do you have like an average of what that grows by?
Yeah, and I honestly don't recommend that. I really
Right.
see this as it's like nitro, and we need to add some glycerin to it. The more
Right.
you can move your money and keep it moving, it's the old velocity of money topic.
Mhm.
The more you can keep your money in motion, the better your overall wallet's return will be. I do believe that our lives have one rate of return. If I'm making 8% of my mutual funds, but I'm losing 20% of my credit card, that
Mhm.
I'm going backwards, right? So using the policy is better than just letting it soak and sour inside the policy. But here's kind of the rate of return on these policies are going to be in the cash equivalent side of your portfolio. They'll
Sure.
never wow you with 20% returns. I've seen them as low as 4. I've seen 4%. I've seen them as high as 7% internal rate of return.
Mhm.
But that's after tax and that's after expenses.
Mhm.
So kind of look at it in that kind of souped up, beefed up cash equivalent part of your portfolio.
Well, it sounds like I'm going to say possibly or potentially still could beat what you stated at the beginning of the call, what the actual average rate of return is on the stock market.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, who knows where the next 30 years will take us? I mean,
Right.
I'll leave that up to your listeners to decide what the market might do. As boomers retire and as debt mounts in our government and so forth, who knows what the markets or taxes will be like in the future, right? So
Right.
yeah, I'm hitching my wagon I keep a lot of my own cash in these policies. I do believe in this strategy myself. But maybe in our minutes here we have, Jack, I'd love to at least briefly mention who shouldn't do this.
Sure.
Because this is not a magic pill. I don't see this as like some panacea. There are ways to mess this up too. People who really should maybe look away from this or look elsewhere for their financial strategies. If you cannot save your money, start with just a normal savings account. Don't go into debt putting money into one of these things. And certainly it does still take saving for you to be able to do this. It's not
Right.
other people's. I guess that's a one downside is you still have to save, but is that really? I mean, maybe that's a good thing. Since most Americans are not saving right now. Another, don't count yourself out if you're too sick or have too many birthday candles on your cake. I mean, these policies are really designed for the cash, not the death benefit. So you can have also, I have folks who are in their 70s starting these policies on themselves or their adult children, their grandchildren. But it does still, I mean, it's a slow and steady wins the race kind of financial vehicle. Long-term growth, there are still insurance expenses in the first few years. So, if you're looking for overnight success, get rich quick stuff, look elsewhere. This is, someone once said this is more of a get rich for sure kind of financial vehicle.
Sure. So, this sounds really interesting, but it sounds almost too good to be true. Is there anything that we're missing here?
Yeah, like I said, it is still in the real world, it still works in the rules of the financial universe, right? So again, it does cost something to buy life insurance, even when you squeeze those expenses down. And we cut the expenses down from old-fashioned whole life by about 70%. That cuts the commissions down too, by the way. I just think that's the right thing to do. It's the fiduciary thing to do, I believe, to work in our client's best interest. But there's still expenses. We try to be as transparent about that as possible. We do not charge assets under management fees on these life insurance contracts. And that gets rid of a lot of the fees that mutual funds would be loaded up with. Or, heck, even real estate costs something to buy, right? Closing costs. So, it still costs something to get into this strategy. And we just have to weigh the benefits and the costs. So, yeah, do your own due diligence. I guess it's the short answer to that question.
Sure. And then is there like a certain amount that somebody would need to flood the account with in order to get started?
Yeah. I really wouldn't recommend, back to that first, unless you can save, don't look at this, start with just getting your budget right and that sort of thing first. But I'd say, if you can set aside even a couple $100 a month, you can at least look at this. $400 or $500 a month is a good place to start. But, even if that's not possible, we're happy to kind of review things with you. It's surprising how many interviews and conversations and financial consultations we'll have with clients and folks looking into this, and they think they can't do it. Oh, I don't have any money in my budget. And then they say that they got a $6,000 tax refund recently.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe we could put that money to better work,
right.
than that flat screen TV you might want to buy or something like that,
right.
With your tax refund. So there's all sorts of ways. We look at about 10 to 20 different ways to just help organize one's finances to get it working more efficiently for you.
Sure. So if they want more information, I know how do they get a hold of you? I know you have a podcast, and we'll make sure we include that in the show notes, but what was the name of that again? And I know you mentioned it earlier.
Yeah. If you want to go to anywhere you're listening to this show, you can also find us at Not Your Average Financial Podcast, and our website is notyouraverageFinancialPodcast.com. Mm-hmm. Jack, we want to keep that URL nice and short.
Sure. Yeah.
Just kidding. And then if you go to the website, however, there is a place where you can click Request a Meeting. Mm-hmm. Big button there. And I or one of my associates would be happy to chat for 15 minutes just to hear you out and see what questions you have from this. And by the way, if you include REI Rookies podcast in the notes of the event, of the calendar event, I'll be sure to send you a free copy of our best-selling book, Compliments of Jack.
Hey, that's awesome. I always like to have free stuff for the listeners. So
there you go.
Make sure you use that code, everybody, REI Rookies. And, I really wanted to thank you for your time again, Mark. This has been really enlightening. And I've heard of this strategy before, but I think you do have a very unique take on it, especially with the mindset of trying to keep the costs and everything down for your clients. I think there might be some good fits there.
Yeah, thanks. It's something we've stumbled across, found to be extremely valuable. It's not all we do. We are a full financial firm. However, when we look over most people's portfolios, there's a big gap, and that is, using what we've described as that I think fits some of those holes.
Yeah. So thank you again, and everybody, make sure you check the show notes. I'll have all of Mark's links there. But really, again, appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, that was Jack's interview with Mark Willis. And we've put a lot of effort into providing useful content. And if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a small donation. Head over to patreon.com/REI Rookies. If you've had any thoughts or questions, shoot us an email at info@reirookies.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at REI Rookies. And if you like what you're hearing, head over to iTunes, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It really helps other rookie investors out there find the show. And remember, get off the bench and get into the game. We'll see you next time. This episode is brought to you by FargoTurnkey.com. Do you live in a good cash flowing market? If so, Turnkey isn't the best choice for you. You should buy in your market. If you don't live in a great market for investors, where can you find profitable cash flowing properties? We love the Midwest, where prices are reasonable and the people are great. Ever heard of North Dakota Nice or see the movie Fargo? That's where we live. We personally invest here and have lived here all of our lives. How does Turnkey work? We find the property, we rehab the property, we find you a tenant and place you under the care of our local property manager, who we trust with all our own investment properties. I'm sure you have questions about how the process works and what to do next. If that's the case, fill out the form on FargoTurnkey.com and we'll reach out to see if you are a good fit for our business. We have a limited supply of properties every month, so we can sell only to a few qualified buyers. See you at FargoTurnkey.com.
I don't like to tell a man what to do with his money, but if you ain't investing in property, then you're dumber than a dummy.
I'm not dumb. I'm smart.
Well, buy property. That's my advice.